The word Varangian comes from the ancient languages of Scandinavia, carrying a deep connection to a unique warrior merchant culture that played a pivotal role in reshaping Eastern Europe's political landscape. It stems from the Old Norse word Varangi, which is linked to vera, meaning pledges or oaths. This origin highlights what made the Varangians distinct. They were men bound by sacred vows of loyalty and mutual protection. Unlike the loosely organized groups of raiders commonly seen among Vikings, the Varangians operated within tight-knit brotherhoods, where personal honor and collective responsibility were central to their identity. The evolution of the term shows just how widespread the Varangians became across medieval Europe. Byzantine Greek texts refer to them as Bargai, while Slavic chronicles use variations such as Varangi. The consistency of the terminology across different regions reinforces the strong, unified identity these warrior merchants held throughout their centuries-long journey. Specifically, the Old Norse Varangi referred to individuals who had sworn oaths within a military or trading fellowship, distinguishing them from regular merchants or temporary raiders. Archaeological discoveries on the Swedish island of Gotland shed light on the Varangian trading networks that predated their military campaigns. Among the hundreds of Gotlandic silver hoards, there is a striking concentration of Islamic dirhams, Byzantine solidi, and Western European deniers. One particularly remarkable find, the Spillings hoard, discovered in 1999, contained over 14,000 silver coins and various silver items, weighing around 67 kilograms. The dates of these coins, spanning from the 8th to 11th centuries, correspond directly with the period when Varangians expanded eastward along the river systems that would eventually become Russia. Geographically, the Varangians originated mainly from the Swedish territories of Uppland and Södermanland, which later merged to form the medieval Kingdom of Sweden. The Mälaren Valley, with its complex network of rivers connecting to the Baltic Sea, served as the launch point for their expansive journeys, eventually reaching places like Constantinople and Baghdad. Excavations at Birka, the prominent trading hub in 9th and 10th century Sweden, have unearthed a diverse array of artifacts, from Greenland walrus ivory to Chinese silk, showing the far-reaching influence of Swedish merchants. Birka's excavations have uncovered intriguing evidence of trade with the East that predates the well-established timelines for Varangian expansion. Fragments of silk, with patterns typical of Central Asian production, glass beads similar to those found in the territories of the Volga Bulgars, and silver arm rings of distinctly Slavic craftsmanship, all point to an established trade network stretching deep into Eastern Europe by the early 9th century. The discovery of the Birka warrior grave, known as BJ 581, adds another layer of complexity to our understanding of Varangian society. Initially thought to be the burial of a male warrior, DNA analysis in 2017 revealed the remains were those of a woman, challenging long-held beliefs about Varangian military culture and demonstrating the sophisticated, inclusive nature of their society. In 9th century Scandinavia, the socio-political climate was ripe for eastward expansion. Limited agricultural land in central Sweden, combined with the growing power of emerging dynasties, led to significant pressure on the population. Traditional social structures, where wealth and loyalty were distributed through gift-giving and military leadership, began to shift. Successful war leaders were accumulating wealth and followers, leading to a class of professional warriors who needed opportunities for profit and glory. The fragmentation of the Carolingian Empire after Charlemagne's death in 814 disrupted the established Western trade routes, pushing Scandinavian merchants to seek new ways to access the wealth of the Byzantine Empire and the Islamic world. The river systems of Eastern Europe, notably the Volga and Dnieper, offered an easier path than the dangerous sea voyages to the west, providing relatively safe passage for large expeditions carrying valuable trade goods. Swedish society at the time operated through a complex mix of regional kingdoms and small chiefdoms, where power was concentrated among those who could command loyalty through successful military leadership and gift-giving. The archaeological evidence from sites like Gamla shows a society in transition, where ancient burial rituals such as ship cremations and elaborate grave goods blended with the growing influence of Christianity. This flexibility was crucial for the Varangians' ability to adapt to the diverse and ever-changing religious and ethnic landscape of Eastern Europe. When compared with their Western Viking counterparts, the Varangians displayed key differences in motivation and strategy. While the Norwegians and Danes were primarily focused on raiding, territorial conquest, and short-term campaigns, the Swedish Varangians approached their ventures with a combination of military strength and business savvy. The Western Vikings' famous hit-and-run tactics, including raids on monasteries and coastal settlements, were starkly different from the Varangian strategy of establishing long-term trading posts and political alliances along their eastern routes. The Varangian expeditions were typically large-scale operations, with groups traveling together for extended periods. They often set up winter quarters at strategic locations along major rivers, requiring careful planning and a substantial initial investment. This level of organization set them apart from the opportunistic raids conducted by Western Vikings. Archaeological finds along the Volga and Dnieper rivers show permanent Scandinavian settlements, complete with defensive structures, storage facilities, and craft production areas. The leadership of Varangian expeditions typically combined military expertise with commercial acumen. Leaders were often skilled negotiators, able to strike complex trade deals while commanding the respect of their armed followers. One such leader, Rurik, whose activities in the mid-9th century laid the foundations for the Rurikid dynasty, embodied this dual focus on military leadership and political strategy. Evidence from Staloga, considered the first major Varangian settlement in Eastern Europe, highlights the sophisticated nature of these early establishments. Founded around 753, Staloga exhibited clear Scandinavian architectural influences alongside Slavic and Finno-Ugric elements, indicating a multicultural trading hub. The discovery of Scandinavian-style longhouses, specialized workshops for metalworking and beekeeping, and significant quantities of imported goods confirms the site's role as a crucial commercial center. The material culture of the Varangians, as uncovered through archaeology, reveals their remarkable ability to adapt and blend cultures. Weapons found in Varangian contexts show a strong preference for high-quality Frankish swords, often inscribed with names like Ulfert or Injury. These were paired with traditional Scandinavian spearheads and axes. Personal adornments also reflect this cultural fusion, combining Scandinavian designs with Byzantine and Islamic influences to create unique hybrid styles. This mix of cultures is a defining feature of Varangian identity and is clearly visible in the artifacts they left behind. The economic success of the Varangians was built on exploiting natural resources from the north that were highly sought after in southern markets. Furs, especially sable, marten, and fox pelts, were in high demand in the Byzantine and Islamic worlds, commanding premium prices. Other key commodities in the Varangian trade included amber from the Baltic shores, walrus ivory from Arctic expeditions, and slaves which were either captured in raids or purchased from local populations. On their return journeys, the Varangians brought luxury goods such as Byzantine silk, Islamic silver, spices, and fine manufactured items to Scandinavian markets. The Varangians' transformation of scattered river systems into a vast, well-organized trade route stands as one of medieval Europe's most impressive logistical feats. Their route to the Byzantine Greeks, chronicled in the Primary Chronicle, evolved from small local waterways into an expansive network, capable of supporting massive expeditions carrying tons of merchandise. The Dnieper River system was the backbone of this route, stretching 400 miles from the northern forests to the steppes leading toward the Black Sea. The main path followed the Love River southward, requiring the first major portage at the watershed divide that separated the Baltic and Black Sea drainage basins. Archaeological evidence from this portage area shows well-worn paths and timber-reinforced roads, which were systematically developed to accommodate regular trade traffic. The Dnieper River further south became the central hub for Varangian merchants, with expeditions consolidating here after completing the northern portages. The river's course varied greatly, beginning as a narrow waterway winding through dense forests and later widening into a broader stream as it neared the Black Sea rapids. Varangian influence in Novgorod was clear in the establishment of specialized quarters, where Scandinavian merchants had warehouses, workshops, and homes. Kiev, located where the Dnieper's upper reaches meet the lower river leading to the Black Sea, represented the crown jewel of the entire trade system. Positioned on high bluffs overlooking the river, Kiev had both defensive advantages and symbolic authority over all traffic attempting to pass. The strategic importance of Kiev wasn't just due to its position on the Dnieper route. The city controlled access to several tributary rivers, such as the Desna and Pripet, which provided connections to Slavic territories and alternative routes to Western Europe. This made Kiev even more valuable, as controlling the city meant controlling much of Eastern Europe's trade. The wealth generated by Kiev's position enabled its rulers to maintain strong military forces and build diplomatic relationships essential for long-distance commerce. The Varangians revolutionized trade through the establishment of tribute systems, transforming potentially hostile Slavic populations into reliable suppliers of goods and military support. Rather than merely raiding for slaves and wealth, Varangian leaders struck sophisticated deals that ensured regular deliveries of furs, honey, wax, and other valuable commodities. Archaeological evidence for the tribute systems used by the Varangians can be found in the standardized weights and measures discovered throughout the trade routes, suggesting centralized control over transactions. The discovery of sealed storage facilities at key settlements shows that tribute goods were not just collected but processed and stored before being sent out on larger trade expeditions. Managing these large-scale operations required careful record-keeping and reliable agents who could handle complex multi-party agreements. However, the relationship between the Varangians and the Slavic populations was about more than just extracting tribute. Local craftsmen were encouraged to create goods specifically for export, leading to the development of specialized industries in various regions. The Varangians' success in building stable tributary relationships also required navigating a complex political landscape. With competing clans, shifting alliances, and diverse cultural practices, diplomatic skill was just as important as military power. Figures like Oleg of Novgorod exemplify this, as they not only established tribute systems but also solidified them through sophisticated negotiations. Evidence from Slavic settlements shows a gradual adoption of Scandinavian material culture, including weapon styles, jewelry, and architectural features. This suggests cultural exchange rather than simple domination. The seasonal nature of river navigation played a crucial role in shaping the Varangian commercial operations. Spring expeditions took advantage of high water levels caused by melting snow and rainfall, allowing heavily loaded vessels to navigate shallower parts of the rivers that would later become impassable. However, these spring floods also made navigation dangerous, with swift currents, floating debris, and unpredictable water levels. Summer offered the most favorable conditions for large-scale trading, with stable water levels and predictable weather patterns. Archaeological evidence shows that most major expeditions departed from northern bases in late spring, traveled south during the summer, conducted business in places like Constantinople, and then returned north before the winter freeze made river navigation impossible. This annual cycle required careful coordination across vast distances and multiple political territories. During the winter months, Varangian merchants used the time for preparation, maintenance, and local trade. The cargo capacity of these boats was crucial to the economic success of the Varangian expeditions. A typical trading boat could carry 15 to 20 tons of goods, representing significant value in high-demand commodities like furs and silver. The ability to move such large quantities of valuable goods across the entire river system made it possible to accumulate the wealth that funded further expansion and allowed for the establishment of political control over key territories. As the river system matured, the portage techniques developed by Varangian traders became increasingly sophisticated. One of the most treacherous parts of the entire trade route was the Dnieper Rapids, a series of 7 major cataracts where the river drops about 130 feet over 40 meters. Defensive positions built on islands and promontories within the rapid zone show that the Varangians also had to deal with human threats, likely from Pecheneг raiders who knew the risks of attacking heavily loaded trade expeditions in these difficult waters. Successfully navigating the Dnieper Rapids marked the beginning of the final, most crucial phase of the Varangian journey south. Beyond the rapids, the river widened into a series of shallow lakes and marshy deltas before reaching the Black Sea. The primary chronicle's account of the calling of the Varangians in 862 is one of the most debated historical narratives in medieval Europe, blending concrete political events with legendary elements that serve the political needs of later Kievan rulers. Compiled in Kiev during the early 12th century by monks aiming to legitimize the Rurikid dynasty, this origin story portrays the Slavic and Finnic tribes as having voluntarily invited Scandinavian rulers to bring order to their chaotic lands. The date given in the chronicle for Rurik's arrival, 862, also coincides suspiciously with other significant events in Varangian expansion, such as the first recorded Rurik's attack on Constantinople in 860. This alignment of dates implies that later chroniclers might have artificially synchronized events to create a more coherent narrative. The figure of Rurik himself is a fascinating historical puzzle. The primary chronicle describes him as one of three brothers who divided northern territories, with Rurik taking Novgorod, Cineas ruling Belozzara, and Truva overseeing Izbe. The names Cineas and Truva closely resemble Old Norse terms such as Senna and Thruva, suggesting these may be distorted references to Rurik's household and retinue rather than actual siblings. Further complicating matters, archaeological investigations at the supposed capital of Rurik, Novgorod, reveal significant chronological issues with the traditional narrative. However, the nearby settlement of Rutkovo-Gorodische, situated at the confluence of the Volga and Mista rivers, shows evidence of high-status occupation starting in the mid-9th century. This fortified settlement, featuring Scandinavian-style longhouses and substantial defensive works, likely served as the actual seat of early Varangian power in the region. Looking at the Rurikid dynasty through the lens of Scandinavian political practices, rather than the romanticized chronicle narrative, lends credibility to the idea of a Varangian leadership structure. Varangian leaders typically rose to power through military success, commercial acumen, and the ability to maintain loyalty among a diverse group of followers. The political structure established by Rusik and his successors represents a blend of Scandinavian military organization and the administrative practices of the Slavs and Finns. Archaeological evidence from fortified settlements across the region shows the development of hierarchical settlement patterns, with major centers like Rusikovo-Gorodische overseeing smaller trading posts and tribute collection points. Staloga provides compelling archaeological evidence for early Varangian settlement and the gradual formation of the Rose political structure. Founded around 753 at the confluence of the Vilov River and Lyoska Creek, Staloga occupied a strategic location controlling access between Lake Ladoga and the river routes leading south toward the Dnieper system. Craft production at Staloga reached remarkable sophistication during the 9th and 10th centuries. The earliest fortifications at Varangian sites were simple earth ramparts reinforced with timber palisades, but over time these structures evolved into more robust stone and timber defenses, capable of withstanding prolonged sieges. Excavations at these sites have uncovered specialized defensive features such as gate towers and flanking bastions, indicating a deep knowledge of contemporary European military architecture. Novgorod's rise as the political center of northern Rose territories occurred gradually during the 10th century, spurred by its strategic location at the convergence of multiple river systems. Its role as a commercial and administrative focal point made it an inevitable hub of activity. Unlike Staloga, which developed organically as a trading post, Novgorod appears to have been intentionally established as a political center, designed to control access to the southern trade routes. Archaeological evidence from Novgorod reflects careful urban planning, with the settlement divided into distinct districts, each serving specific functions within the broader political and commercial system. The Slavno district, for example, housed commercial activities and foreign merchants, while the Nav district contained the residences of local administrators and craftsmen. The famous Vecha Popular Assembly of Novgorod may have originated during the Varangian period as a way to manage relations between Scandinavian rulers and local populations. Excavations at the supposed Vechai site reveal large timber platforms and amphitheater-like earthworks, capable of hosting large gatherings. While definitive evidence of the Vechais dates to later centuries, the infrastructure suggests that formal assembly practices began much earlier. Weapon finds from Varangian sites provide the most dramatic evidence of this blending. High-quality Frankish sword blades inscribed with names like Ulfert were paired with Scandinavian-style hilts, and decorated with Slavic motifs, creating weapons that serve both practical and symbolic purposes. Similarly, spearheads exhibit hybrid features, with Scandinavian blade designs modified to suit local preferences and adorned with motifs from various artistic traditions. Personal ornaments also reflect this cultural blending. Brooches found in women's graves combined Scandinavian functional designs with decorative elements from Byzantine, Islamic, and local traditions. The famous tortoise brooches, or common in Scandinavian women's dress, appear in modified forms that incorporate Slavic metalworking techniques and aesthetic preferences. These changes suggest an active negotiation between different cultural traditions rather than simple cultural dominance. The emergence of Oleg as the dominant Varangian leader in the late 9th century marked a significant shift from the fragmented tribal arrangements that characterized early Rus territories to a unified political structure capable of projecting power over vast distances. The material culture from the layers associated with Oleg's rise to power shows a marked increase in military equipment and weapons, suggesting that his ascent was accompanied by significant military preparations. Silver hoards buried during this time point to the accumulation of resources for large-scale military campaigns, while specialized siege equipment components suggest plans for operations against fortified cities. Oleg's decision to target Kiev for his southern expedition marked a dramatic shift from the more commercially focused activities of the earlier Varangians in the region. The expedition that departed from Novgorod around 882 was the largest and most coordinated Varangian military operation up to that point. Oleg's approach to Kiev involved careful reconnaissance and diplomatic maneuvering, intended to minimize resistance while maximizing the psychological impact of his arrival. The seizure of Kiev, achieved through a combination of military assault and political maneuvering, led to the removal of the existing leadership, while preserving the city's commercial infrastructure and population. Following the conquest, Oleg showed a deep understanding of the administrative requirements necessary to govern such a diverse region. Archaeological evidence from early years of Oleg's rule in Kiev reveals massive construction projects that transformed the city from a regional trading center into the capital of a territorial state. New fortifications incorporated advanced defensive techniques inspired by contemporary European military architecture. Expanded residential areas were created to accommodate the growing population of administrators, military personnel, and craftsmen required to run the newly unified Rus territories. The construction of large ceremonial halls and buildings demonstrated Oleg's commitment to establishing Kiev as a permanent political center, not just a commercial outpost. Oleg's unification of the northern and southern Rus' principalities created opportunities for coordinated military actions against external threats, particularly the Khazar Khaganate. The Khazars, a Turkic people who controlled key river crossings and had established powerful trade relationships, were a significant obstacle to Varangian expansion into the lucrative Caspian Sea markets and the broader Islamic world. Soon after consolidating power in Kiev, Oleg turned his attention to the Khazars. His campaigns targeted the tributary relationships that provided much of the Khaganate's wealth and military strength. Archaeological evidence from Khazar strongholds along the Don River and its tributaries reveals destruction layers from the late 9th century, suggesting that Oleg's forces carried out systematic attacks on Khazar defensive positions. These campaigns relied on river-based logistics, allowing Rus forces to penetrate deep into Khazar territory while maintaining secure supply lines to their northern bases. The military strategies employed in these campaigns showcase significant innovation, particularly in coordinating riverborne and land-based operations. Specialized vessels capable of carrying siege equipment enabled the Rus to assault fortifications that had previously been seen as impregnable. The capture of key Khazar fortresses allowed Oleg's forces to establish advanced bases for further operations, while simultaneously denying the Khazars access to crucial defensive positions. To maintain control over the newly acquired territories and integrate Khazar-controlled Slavic tribes into the Rus' realm, Oleg relied heavily on diplomacy, as well as military might. Many Slavic communities had long established relationships with Khazar rulers, which involved not only paying tribute, but also providing military service and participating in trade networks. Archaeological evidence from Slavic settlements that transitioned from Khazar to Rus's control shows gradual changes in material culture, reflecting the evolving political and trade relationships. The appearance of Scandinavian-style weapons and ornaments, alongside traditional Slavic artifacts, indicates cultural exchange rather than mere conquest. While adaptations to defensive structures suggest adjustments to new military needs, the continued prosperity of these settlements reveals that the shift to Rus's control provided economic benefits that offset any disruptions in established relationships. Integrating the various Slavic tribes into Oleg's tribute system involved recognizing existing social structures and traditional leadership patterns, while introducing Rus's oversight to ensure reliable compliance with new obligations. The 907 expedition against Constantinople represented the peak of Oleg's strategic vision, showcasing the military might of the unified Rus state while securing favorable commercial agreements with the Byzantine Empire. The scale of this operation, which chronicle accounts say involved over 2,000 vessels and 80,000 warriors, required unprecedented coordination across Oleg's territories. Although the siege of Constantinople ultimately failed to capture the city, the expedition achieved Oleg's primary objectives, demonstrating Rus's military power and securing favorable terms for future commercial relations. Byzantine chronicles tell of the terror inspired by the Rus's assault, including the famous story of Oleg nailing his shield to the gates of Constantinople as a symbol of victory. The treaty negotiations following the 907 expedition highlighted Oleg's sharp diplomatic understanding. The agreement secured favorable terms for Rus's merchants in Constantinople, including reduced customs duties, guaranteed accommodations, and legal protections that facilitated long-distance trade. Archaeological evidence from the following years shows an increase in Byzantine goods in Rus's territories, confirming that the expedition, though unsuccessful in capturing the imperial capital, achieved its commercial goals. The administrative innovations introduced by Oleg laid the foundation for the medieval Rus state, which would dominate Eastern Europe for centuries. The development of standardized legal codes, military organization, and tribute systems created institutional frameworks that survived changes in leadership, providing stability for the diverse populations under Rus control. Archaeological evidence from administrative centers across Oleg's territories shows the construction of specialized buildings for record-keeping, treasury functions, and judicial proceedings, underscoring the sophistication of these early governmental institutions. Oleg's death around 912 marked the end of an era in Varangian expansion, but the peaceful succession of his son Igor to the throne of Kiev highlighted the institutional stability he had established during his 3 decades of rule. Unlike the uncertain transition that followed Rurik's death, Igor's accession was smooth, guided by established protocols that balanced hereditary claims with the practical needs of maintaining control over the vast Rurik's territories. Archaeological evidence from Kiev during this period shows continued construction projects and bustling commercial activity, suggesting that the change in leadership did not disrupt the administrative systems that had been key to Rurik's dominance. Igor's military reforms went beyond just fortifications and defenses. They represented a fundamental shift in how the Rus's army was organized and operated. The creation of specialized training facilities at major military centers indicates that Igor's forces were systematically prepared for the tactical demands of steppe warfare. The integration of Slavic military traditions into Rus's tactical doctrine was another important innovation. Slavic tribes had extensive experience defending against nomadic raids, and their techniques for forest fighting and fortification defense complemented the offensive capabilities of the Varangians. The archaeological record shows that Varangian strongholds adopted Slavic-style fortifications, while weapon finds suggest the integration of Slavic archery traditions with Scandinavian close combat methods. One of Igor's first major military campaigns targeted the Drevlians, a Slavic tribe that had stopped paying tribute following Oleg's death. Likely believing that Igor would be unable to enforce his rule, The campaign against the Drevlians served multiple purposes beyond merely collecting tribute. It allowed Igor to demonstrate his military competence and tested his reformed military system against a people familiar with Rus's tactics. The campaign revealed both the strengths and weaknesses of Igor's new military structure. His forces successfully penetrated deep into Drevlian territory, capturing several key strongholds, which demonstrated improved coordination and tactical flexibility compared to previous Varangian operations. However, logistical challenges, particularly in maintaining supply lines through hostile territory, exposed vulnerabilities in the new system. The Drevlian campaign also required Igor to rebuild administrative relationships that had been disrupted by the tribe's rebellion. Archaeological evidence from Drevlian settlements shows that Igor established new Rus's administrative centers designed to ensure reliable tribute collection while preventing future rebellions. Igor's most ambitious military undertaking, the 941 expedition against Constantinople, was an attempt to emulate Oleg's earlier success and establish his own reputation as a military leader capable of threatening the Byzantine Empire. Strategic planning for the 941 expedition incorporated lessons learned from Oleg's earlier campaign, with particular attention given to the defensive improvements made by the Byzantines. Intelligence gathered through commercial networks indicated that Constantinople had reinforced its naval defenses and developed new tactics to counter large-scale riverborne assaults. Igor's planners attempted to overcome these advantages through surprise and concentrated force, but the execution of these plans ultimately failed. The expedition's departure from Kiev marked the beginning of one of the most disastrous military campaigns in early Rus's history. Despite the enormous resources invested in the venture, the logistical challenges of coordinating such a large fleet over the extended distance to Constantinople exposed vulnerabilities that Byzantine intelligence services quickly exploited. The destruction of Igor's fleet was not just a military defeat, but a catastrophic loss of resources and manpower that threatened the stability of the entire Rus state. Archaeological evidence from the period following the expedition shows the burial of silver hoards and the abandonment of construction projects, signaling the economic disruption caused by the loss. The political fallout from the 941 disaster forced Igor to rebuild his military reputation while addressing internal challenges. Several Slavic tribes stopped paying tribute, sensing an opportunity to resist the weakened Rus's leadership. Meanwhile, the Pechenegs, a Turkic nomadic confederation, launched intensified raids on Rus's territories, recognizing the vulnerability exposed by the failed Constantinople campaign. Igor's response to these challenges demonstrated remarkable resilience and strategic adaptation. Instead of immediately launching another major campaign, he focused on rebuilding his military forces and implemented defensive strategies that maximized the effectiveness of his reduced resources. The 944 campaign ultimately achieved its main objectives through diplomacy rather than military conquest. Instead of storming Constantinople, Igor secured a favorable commercial treaty that restored Rus's trading privileges while avoiding the catastrophic losses of the previous campaign. The treaty terms, preserved in both Rus's and Byzantine sources, reveal Igor's deep understanding of diplomacy, recognizing that lasting benefits often came from commercial agreements rather than military victories. The agreement established protocols for future relations, ensuring that diplomatic and trade interactions between the two powers would be governed for decades to come. Igor's death in 945 during a tribute collection expedition among the Drevlians marked the end of an era characterized by military expansion and the beginning of a period focused on internal consolidation and administrative development. His death, attributed to excessive greed and demanding additional tribute, highlighted the ongoing tensions between the Varangian rulers and their Slavic subjects, a theme that would continue to influence Rus's political development for generations. The succession of his widow, Olga, as regent for their young son, represented a significant shift in Varangian political traditions. Olga's assumption of power was unprecedented in a society that had only recognized male leadership in military and administrative roles. Her ability to consolidate authority required not only personal political skill, but also the support of the institutional structures that had evolved sufficiently to accept female leadership under these exceptional circumstances. Archaeological evidence from Kiev during Olga's early regency shows continued major construction projects and commercial activity, indicating that the transition to female leadership did not disrupt the fundamental operations of the Rus's state. The administrative reforms implemented during her regency addressed many of the systemic problems that had plagued Iga's reign, particularly in tribute collection and provincial administration. Olga's establishment of standardized tribute rates and collection procedures eliminated much of the arbitrary extraction that had provoked local rebellions, while the creation of permanent administrative centers provided reliable mechanisms for governing distant territories. Archaeological evidence shows the construction of fortified administrative compounds at strategic locations, underscoring systematic efforts to improve governmental efficiency and control. Olga's famous revenge against the Drevlians for Igor's murder demonstrated both her personal determination and her strategic use of psychological warfare. The elaborate deceptions she employed to eliminate the Drevlian leadership, including the legendary burning of their capital using fire-carrying birds, revealed a combination of practical military objectives and symbolic displays of Rus's power. Whether or not the specific details recorded in later chronicles accurately reflect historical events, the systematic destruction of Drevlian resistance established Olga's reputation as a ruler capable of decisive action. Olga's conversion to Christianity around 957 marked a pivotal moment in the cultural development of Rus. Her baptism in Constantinople, recorded in both Rus and Byzantine sources, demonstrated her diplomatic sophistication and established precedents for future religious and political relationships with the Byzantine Empire. Archaeological evidence from this period shows the first significant appearance of Christian symbols and artifacts in Rus contexts, marking the beginning of a religious transformation that would accelerate under her successors. The administrative reforms she implemented created institutional frameworks that would endure through changes in leadership, providing stability for the diverse populations under Rus's control. Regular tribute collection systems eliminated much of the arbitrary extraction of resources that had characterized earlier periods, while the creation of permanent administrative positions offered career opportunities for talented individuals, regardless of their ethnic origins. Archaeological evidence from administrative centers shows the development of specialized buildings designed for record-keeping and judicial functions, indicating the sophistication of the governmental institutions that emerged during this period. Following the death of Olga's son Sviatoslav in 972, Rus was plunged into a period of internal conflict. The division of his territories among his three sons, Yaropolk in Kiev, Oleg among the Drevlians, and Vladimir in Novgorod, created competing power centers. This fragmentation inevitably led to armed conflict, as each brother sought to assert supremacy over the others, threatening the political unity achieved through decades of Varangian expansion and consolidation. Archaeological evidence from this period reveals the construction of rival fortifications and the accumulation of weapon caches at key locations, signaling preparations for the civil war that would ultimately determine the future structure of the Rus's state. Vladimir, initially ruling over Novgorod, found himself at a significant disadvantage compared to his brothers, who controlled wealthier southern territories and crucial trade routes connecting Kiev to Constantinople. Although the northern territories were strategically important for controlling Baltic trade networks, they lacked the population density and agricultural productivity needed to support large military forces. Vladimir's survival during the early stages of the civil war depended on his ability to leverage Novgorod's connections with Scandinavian mercenaries and build alliances with local Slavic populations, many of whom resented their new rulers. Open warfare between the brothers began after Oleg's death in 977, during a conflict with Yaropolk's forces, leaving Vladimir as the last challenger to Kiev's supremacy. Yaropolk's control over Kiev and the Drevlian territories gave him a decisive advantage in resources and manpower, forcing Vladimir to flee to Scandinavia in search of military support from his maternal relatives. This exile proved critical to Vladimir's eventual success, providing him with the opportunity to recruit experienced Varangian warriors and establish the strategic alliances that would enable his return to power. The mercenary army Vladimir assembled in Scandinavia marked a significant evolution in Varangian military organization, blending traditional warrior bands with specialized units for specific tactical roles. Archaeological evidence from this period shows standardized military equipment, including siege engines and anti-fortification devices, pointing to meticulous planning for operations against heavily fortified positions. The scale of these preparations suggests that Vladimir's supporters understood the high stakes of the campaign and its potential to reshape the balance of power in Eastern Europe. Vladimir's return to Novgorod in 980 with his mercenary forces marked the beginning of a methodical campaign to eliminate Yaropolk's supporters, while consolidating control over the northern territories. The siege of Kiev in 980 was the climax of Vladimir's campaign. Byzantine sources describe the use of advanced siege techniques, with multiple assault columns and specialized siege engines that overwhelmed Kiev's formidable defensive works. Yaropolk's death during the siege effectively ended the resistance to Vladimir's rule. However, the new ruler faced the challenge of integrating the diverse military forces that had supported the different factions during the civil war. During the 980s, Vladimir turned his military attention to the remaining independent Slavic tribes and nomadic groups that threatened the stability of the Rus territories. Using the enhanced military capabilities developed during the Civil War, he eliminated external threats and expanded the tribute base that supported state operations. The conquest of the Radici and Vyatichi tribes secured vital territory along the upper Dnieper and Oka rivers. The integration of these newly conquered populations into Vladimir's administrative system required a delicate balance between maintaining control and respecting local traditions and leadership structures. Archaeological evidence from these regions shows the establishment of Rus administrative centers alongside existing settlements, creating dual power structures that allowed local autonomy for internal affairs, while ensuring compliance with tribute and military obligations. This strategy proved highly effective in preventing the rebellions that had plagued earlier expansions of Rusod. During Vladimir's reign, polytheistic religious practices remained prevalent across his territories, reflecting the diversity of spiritual traditions. Archaeological findings indicate the construction of elaborate temples dedicated to Slavic, Scandinavian, and other regional deities. The famous pantheon in Kiev, established around 980, included Perun, the Slavic thunder god, and Thor, the Norse god of thunder, among others. These temples served not only as religious centers, but also as political tools, demonstrating royal patronage of diverse traditions and reinforcing state authority through ceremonial functions. The human sacrifices reportedly conducted at these temples, while shocking to later Christian chroniclers, were an established part of early medieval Slavic and Scandinavian religious practices. Archaeological evidence from ritual sites confirms the accuracy of these accounts and reveals the complex ceremonial procedures that governed such activities. The scale and organization of these rituals demonstrated the power of the Rus state, serving both spiritual and political functions, while impressing both subjects and foreign observers. Vladimir's conversion to Christianity around 957 marked a crucial turning point in Rus's cultural development. His baptism in Constantinople, documented by both Rus and Byzantine sources, demonstrated his diplomatic skill and established new precedents for religious and political relations with the Byzantine Empire. The appearance of Christian symbols and artifacts in archaeological contexts from this period marks the beginning of a religious transformation that would accelerate in the following decades. The administrative reforms introduced by Vladimir during his reign laid the foundation for a more centralized and efficient state. Regular tribute collection systems and the establishment of permanent administrative centers contributed to greater stability. And archaeological evidence shows the construction of specialized buildings designed for record-keeping and judicial functions. These developments marked the sophistication of the Rus governmental institutions and set the stage for the long-term consolidation of power in the region. Vladimir's military campaigns during the mid-980s solidified Rus's dominance over crucial frontier regions, showcasing the effectiveness of his reformed military structure against a range of opponents. The successful campaign against the Khazars secured control over the lower Volga trade routes, while operations targeting Pecheneg positions eliminated immediate threats to the southern approaches to Kiev. Archaeological evidence from captured Khazar fortresses reveals systematic destruction, followed by reconstruction according to Rus's defensive principles, indicating that Vladimir intended to integrate these strategic positions into a broader Rus's defensive network. The wealth gained through these military victories allowed Vladimir to fund massive construction projects, transforming Kiev into one of medieval Europe's most impressive cities. Vladimir's diplomatic relationships during this period reflected his understanding that military power alone was not enough to secure long-term success. His strategic marriage alliances with neighboring rulers provided security for Rus's borders while opening opportunities for profitable trade. Archaeological evidence shows an increase in foreign goods in Rus's territories, including Byzantine silk, Islamic silver, and Western European manufactured items, confirming the expansion of commercial networks under Vladimir's rule. The legendary account of Vladimir's decision to adopt a faith in 987, likely embellished over time, underscores the genuine diplomatic and religious considerations that influenced his eventual conversion to Byzantine Christianity. Vladimir's decision was motivated by far more than personal spiritual concerns. The practical implications of choosing a religion extended to crucial political and economic factors. Vladimir's marriage alliance with Byzantine Emperor Basil Sert in 988 was one of medieval Europe's most significant diplomatic achievements, linking the Rus' state to the prestigious imperial family while securing military cooperation against mutual enemies. The terms of this agreement required Vladimir to provide military assistance against the Bulgarian rebels threatening Byzantine control over the Balkans, in exchange for Basil promising his sister Anna to Vladimir after his conversion to Christianity. Archaeological evidence from this period shows the preparation of substantial military forces for deployment to Byzantine territories, including specialized siege equipment designed for assaulting fortified positions. The military expedition that departed for the Balkans in 988 represented the largest coordinated military operation undertaken by Rus's forces since the disasters of Igor's reign. Thousands of warriors, armed with the most advanced weapons and siege equipment available, set out to assist the Byzantines. The logistical challenges of transporting and supplying such a large force across vast distances were immense, but the operation demonstrated the administrative capabilities Vladimir had developed during his consolidation of power. Contemporary Byzantine sources describe the arrival of this Rus army as a decisive factor in suppressing the Bulgarian rebellion and restoring imperial authority over the disputed territories. The successful completion of military operations further solidified Vladimir's reputation as a reliable ally and demonstrated Rus's military capabilities to potential adversaries. The Varangian warriors who participated in these campaigns gained invaluable experience in siege warfare and coordinated operations, skills that would prove essential in future military endeavors. Meanwhile, the wealth acquired through service to the Byzantines funded additional construction projects, further enhancing Vladimir's power. Archaeological evidence shows the increased presence of Byzantine goods in Rus's territories, confirming the economic benefits that resulted from this military alliance. Vladimir's baptism in 988, whether in Kiev or Chersonesus as different sources suggest, marked the beginning of the most profound cultural transformation in Rus's history. His conversion introduced religious and institutional practices that would fundamentally alter the character of Rus's civilization. The mass baptism of Kiev's population, conducted in the Dnieper River according to chronicles, represented a dramatic departure from centuries of pagan traditions and established Christianity as the official religion of the Rus's state. Archaeological evidence from this period shows the systematic destruction of pagan temples and idols, replaced by the construction of Christian churches that employed Byzantine architectural styles and decorative motifs. The creation of the Rus's Orthodox Church required the importation of trained clergy, religious texts, and liturgical objects from Byzantine territories, establishing new channels for cultural exchange that profoundly influenced Rus's intellectual and artistic development. The construction of the Church of the Tithes in Kiev, begun shortly after Vladimir's conversion, was the first major Christian architectural project in Rus's territories, employing Byzantine craftsmen and materials to create a structure that both reflected Vladimir's commitment to his new faith and served as a magnificent setting for royal ceremonies. The Christianization of Rus's society went far beyond religious conversion. It encompassed fundamental changes in legal systems, social relationships, and cultural practices that had characterized Varangian civilization for centuries. The introduction of Byzantine legal concepts, particularly regarding marriage, inheritance, and criminal justice, required careful adaptation to existing Slavic and Scandinavian traditions, establishing new standards for social behavior while maintaining continuity with the past. Archaeological evidence from this period shows significant changes in burial practices, with traditional pagan grave goods and cremation ceremonies gradually giving way to Christian interment practices. This shift reflected new beliefs about death and the afterlife. Alongside these religious changes, educational initiatives launched after Vladimir's conversion sought to create a literate administrative and religious class capable of managing the complexities of a Christian state. The establishment of schools for the children of nobles and merchants taught reading, writing, and religious instruction, which played a key role in developing Rus literary and intellectual culture. Evidence from this time includes writing implements, religious texts, and educational materials, confirming the systematic nature of these educational efforts. Resistance to Christianization in certain regions of Vladimir's realm required careful management. To balance religious goals with political stability, Vladimir employed both persuasion and coercion. In regions that initially resisted conversion, archaeological evidence shows the gradual replacement of pagan religious sites with Christian ones, often built directly over earlier temples to symbolize the triumph of the new faith. Christianization also transformed military culture. The introduction of Christian moral principles, particularly the protection of non-combatants and the regulation of violence in war, led to a shift away from traditional Varangian practices, like slave-taking and indiscriminate raiding. These practices gradually gave way to more regulated forms of warfare. Archaeological evidence suggests changes in weapon types and military equipment, which may reflect this evolution in attitudes toward warfare and violence. In 988 CE, the establishment of the Varangian Guard in Constantinople marked a convergence of Byzantine military needs and the availability of skilled Scandinavian warriors seeking profitable service. Emperor Basil Sotu, facing serious threats from Bulgarian rebels under Samuel, needed reliable military support. The first Varangian contingent, numbering around 6,000 warriors, formed the nucleus of what would become the Varangian Guard. These men were seasoned fighters who had proven their capabilities during the consolidation of Rus's territories. They brought with them the accumulated tactical knowledge of generations of Scandinavian warfare, including expertise in siege operations, naval combat, and infantry formations that made Varangian armies so effective across Eastern Europe. Their equipment was top-tier, featuring Frankish swords with pattern-welded blades, reinforced mail shirts, and the distinctive rattan shields that would come to symbolize the Varangian military. The Varangian Guard's first deployment against the Bulgarian rebels in 989 demonstrated their exceptional combat abilities. In the siege of Vidin, Varangian units used coordinated attacks, combining traditional Scandinavian berserker charges with sophisticated siege techniques adapted from Byzantine military manuals. The psychological impact of these northern warriors, with their towering height, distinctive weapons, and fearsome battle cries, was as significant as their tactical prowess in breaking enemy morale during critical engagements. The successful suppression of the Bulgarian rebellion within 2 years of the Guard's formation confirmed Basil's decision to incorporate these foreign warriors into the imperial military on a permanent basis. The Varangians' performance during the final assault on Samuel's capital at Ohrid further solidified their reputation. The Guard demonstrated their adaptability, excelling in everything from mountain warfare to siege operations against heavily fortified positions. Byzantine accounts describe the professionalism with which the Varangian units executed complex operations, maintaining discipline under extreme pressure and adapting to unexpected challenges. The journey to Constantinople served as a rigorous evaluation for potential members of the Varangian Guard, testing their endurance, discipline, and commitment to imperial service. The route through the Dnieper Rapids and across the Black Sea posed significant challenges, offering an opportunity to assess candidates' physical capabilities character, and reliability under stress. Those who successfully completed this journey and passed final evaluations in Constantinople earned a place in an elite military unit, one that offered unparalleled opportunities for advancement and enrichment. The oath ceremonies that formally inducted new members into the Varangian Guard were solemn events that blended Scandinavian warrior traditions with Byzantine imperial symbolism. These rituals took place in the Hagia Sophia, where candidates swore personal loyalty to the emperor and received blessed weapons, symbolizing their sacred duty to defend imperial authority. The oath, administered in Old Norse to ensure full understanding, bound guards to unwavering obedience to imperial commands, promising faithful service until death or honorable discharge. Archaeological evidence from the guard barracks, including oath rings and ceremonial weapons, confirms the significant role these rituals played in maintaining loyalty and discipline within the unit. The legal status of the Varangian Guard within the Byzantine Empire reflected the unique nature of their service. The empire recognized their exceptional value and granted them privileges that set them apart from regular imperial subjects. Guards enjoyed legal protections, including the right to maintain their traditional religious practices, exemption from certain imperial taxes, and access to imperial courts for resolving disputes related to their service obligations. The Guard's legal status also included protections against arbitrary punishment or dismissal, ensuring that their service contracts were upheld according to imperial law. This legal security was crucial for maintaining the Guard's loyalty, as warriors could serve knowing their sacrifices would be properly compensated, and their rights would be respected. The legal framework governing the Guard's service evolved over time, with imperial legislation addressing the unique circumstances of their position. Archaeological evidence from residential areas in Constantinople, including substantial private dwellings and treasure deposits, shows the wealth that successful service in the Guard could provide. The Guard's first major overseas assignment came in 1038, when they were deployed to Sicily alongside Norman mercenaries and Byzantine regulars. The campaign aimed to reassert Byzantine control over territories lost to Islamic conquest. In this Mediterranean environment, the Guard proved adaptable, transitioning from the forests and rivers of northern Europe to the rugged terrain of southern Italy. The siege of Syracuse in 1040 showcased the Guard's expertise in amphibious operations, as they coordinated naval and land-based attacks that systematically reduced the city's defenses, while preventing enemy reinforcements from reaching the besieged garrison. Contemporary accounts describe the methodical approach of Varangian commanders, who combined traditional siege tactics with innovations adapted from Islamic military practices. The successful capture of Syracuse, after a prolonged siege, cemented the Guard's reputation for persistence and professionalism in extended operations far from their supply bases. The Guard's subsequent service in campaigns against Slavic and nomadic enemies continued to highlight their effectiveness in traditional Varangian warfare. In Syria and Anatolia, the Guard faced their most formidable opponents, Islamic armies with advanced tactical doctrines and military technologies. The Battle of Kani in 1018 saw Varangian units used as shock troops in coordinated attacks that broke through Arab defensive lines. The Guard's involvement in Byzantine palace politics began early, as their position as the emperor's personal troops inevitably drew them into the factional disputes of the imperial court. Their first major political intervention occurred in 989, during the conspiracy of Bardas Phocas. The Guard's loyalty was not based on blind obedience, but on a sophisticated understanding of their position within the imperial system, with loyalty offering them personal advancement and the opportunity to gain substantial wealth. The military prowess that distinguished the Varangian Guard throughout their service stemmed from a blend of exceptional individual warrior skills and sophisticated unit tactics, reflecting centuries of Scandinavian military evolution. Guard training emphasized developing personal combat abilities, enabling warriors to excel in single combat while maintaining the necessary formation discipline for coordinated unit operations. The Guard's weaponry reflected their Scandinavian heritage, while adapting to Byzantine military requirements. Most Guards wielded the long-handled axes, which became their signature weapon, alongside high-quality swords manufactured according to Frankish specifications. The famous Varangian axe, with its broad cutting edge and reinforced handle, proved devastating against both mounted and infantry opponents. Contemporary accounts describe the terrifying effect of Varangian axe charges, where hundreds of guards advanced in tight formation, wielding their weapons with deadly precision. Tactically, the Guards specialized in aggressive offensive operations that exploited their superior individual combat skills and tight unit cohesion. One such formation, the Boar's Head, concentrated experienced warriors at the front of a wedge-shaped attack column, relying on sheer momentum and skill to penetrate enemy lines. This formation required extreme discipline, as each guard had to maintain their position within the wedge while engaging in intense personal combat. Despite their ferocity in battle, the Guards' approach to military operations was highly professional. Their campaigns emphasized careful planning, thorough reconnaissance, and the systematic execution of complex tactical maneuvers. The commanders, often the most experienced guards, possessed an advanced understanding of military strategy, enabling them to adapt traditional Scandinavian tactics to the varied needs of Byzantine service. The Guards' effectiveness stemmed from their combination of individual excellence and collective tactical sophistication, which set them apart from both barbarian warbands and conventional imperial troops. The wealth accumulated by successful Guards during their service created unprecedented opportunities for social advancement that would have been impossible in their Scandinavian homelands, where rigid social hierarchies limited the prospects even of the most capable warriors. In the Byzantine system, military excellence was rewarded with financial compensation, land grants, and access to commercial opportunities, allowing enterprising guards to establish themselves as wealthy landowners or successful merchants. Archaeological evidence from residential areas in Constantinople shows private residences and treasure deposits, confirming the prosperity available to guards who survived the dangers of imperial service and distinguished themselves through exceptional performance. However, the Guards' integration into Byzantine society involved a delicate balance between maintaining their cultural identity and fulfilling the practical requirements of serving within an alien political and social environment. Many Guards married Byzantine women, establishing hybrid households that blended Scandinavian and Byzantine cultural elements, while maintaining links to their northern homelands through continued participation in Guard activities and ceremonies. The children of these marriages often acted as cultural intermediaries, facilitating communication between the Guard and broader Byzantine society while preserving knowledge of Scandinavian traditions. The Guards' ceremonial duties, which occupied much of their time in Constantinople, contrasted with the brutal realities of warfare, yet these functions were essential for maintaining their elite status within the imperial hierarchy. Palace security involved intricate protocols that required guards to participate in complex ceremonial procedures while staying alert for potential threats to imperial safety. Their quarters in the Great Palace Complex, strategically located between the imperial residential areas and the main administrative buildings, allowed for rapid responses to emergencies, symbolizing their role as the ultimate protectors of imperial authority. Archaeological excavations in these areas have uncovered substantial barracks buildings with individual sleeping chambers, communal dining halls, and specialized armories that house the Guards' extensive weapons collection and ceremonial equipment. The Varangian Guard's reputation for unwavering loyalty became legendary across the Byzantine Empire, earning them the trust of emperors who relied on their protection from both external enemies and internal conspiracies. This reputation was built through consistent performance during political crises, such as their role in suppressing the revolt of Bardas Phocas and protecting the imperial family during palace coups and assassination attempts. Contemporary sources describe the psychological effect of the Guards' presence on potential conspirators, whose plots often crumbled when faced with the certainty of confronting these formidable northern warriors. The Guards' loyalty wasn't based on blind obedience, but on a deep understanding of their position within the imperial system, with loyalty bringing personal advancement and wealth. Their oath of personal loyalty to the emperor created direct relationships that transcended the complex hierarchies and competing loyalties of other imperial military units. Being foreign soldiers, they were insulated from the domestic political pressures that often undermined the reliability of Byzantine troops. This combination of personal commitment and political independence made the Guard invaluable as defenders of imperial authority, especially during times of instability. The Guard's military prowess derived from a blend of individual combat skills and sophisticated unit tactics, reflecting centuries of Scandinavian military evolution. The Guard's weaponry reflected both their Scandinavian heritage and their adaptation to Byzantine military needs. Most Guards wielded long-handled axes, which became their signature weapon, alongside high-quality swords manufactured according to Frankish standards. The Varangian axe, with its broad cutting edge and reinforced handle, proved devastating against both mounted and infantry opponents. Contemporary accounts describe the fearsome effect of Varangian axe charges, where hundreds of Guards advanced in tight formation, wielding their weapons with deadly precision. The Guard's tactical doctrine emphasized aggressive offensive operations that took advantage of their superior individual combat skills and unit cohesion. The combination of individual excellence and collective tactical sophistication made the Varangian Guard stand out, distinguishing them from both barbarian warbands and regular imperial troops. The wealth they accumulated through their imperial service opened doors for social mobility, providing opportunities that would have been unavailable in their Scandinavian homelands. The imperial system rewarded military excellence with financial compensation, land grants, and access to commercial ventures, allowing Guards to become wealthy landowners or successful merchants. Archaeological evidence from residential areas in Constantinople shows private residences and treasure deposits, confirming the prosperity enjoyed by Guards who survived the dangers of military service and distinguished themselves. The Guards' integration into Byzantine society, however, required balancing their cultural identity with the demands of serving in a foreign empire. Many Guards married Byzantine women and established hybrid households, combining Scandinavian and Byzantine cultural elements while maintaining ties to their northern homelands through their continued participation in Guard activities. The Guards' influence extended beyond their direct military service. Their tactical innovations and training methods inspired efforts to replicate their success within the Byzantine military. Scandinavian-style weapons and armor became models for imperial production, and archaeological evidence shows widespread adoption of these by other imperial units during the period of the Guard's service, highlighting their impact on Byzantine military development. The Guard's ceremonial duties in Constantinople contrasted sharply with the brutal realities of combat, but were essential to their elite status within the imperial hierarchy. Palace security required them to follow intricate protocols while remaining alert for potential threats. Archaeological excavations of their quarters reveal substantial barracks with individual sleeping chambers, communal dining halls, and specialized armories that house the Guard's weapons and ceremonial equipment. One of the most notable examples of the Guard's transformative power is the career of Harald Sigurdsson, who later became King Harald Hard of Norway. Harald's path to imperial service began under unusual circumstances, after his half-brother Olaf II was defeated at the Battle of Stiklestad in 1030. The 15-year-old Harald was forced into exile, beginning a period of wandering that eventually led him to Constantinople. His service with Yaroslav the Wise in Kiev provided him with valuable military experience and political connections that facilitated his recruitment into the Guard. Though his royal bloodline set him apart from the typical Guards, Harald's exceptional physical strength, royal bearing, and sharp intellect marked him as a potential leader within the unit. Byzantine sources describe Harald as towering above his fellow Scandinavians, with blonde hair and piercing blue eyes that made him stand out in any gathering. His first assignment was routine palace duties, which allowed him to observe Byzantine court politics while developing the diplomatic skills that would be key to his later rise. Harald's first major campaign came during the Byzantine offensive in Sicily, where the Guard was deployed to reclaim territories lost to Arab conquest. The logistical challenges of transporting and supplying the Guard across the Mediterranean demonstrated the administrative skills Harald had developed during his early service. The campaign also gave him the chance to showcase his military innovations, including new siege techniques that combined traditional Scandinavian methods with engineering principles adapted from Islamic military manuals. Harald's famous use of fire-bearing birds to ignite the thatched roofs of buildings in Syracuse exemplified his creative thinking and military ingenuity. The successful capture of Syracuse in 1038 boosted Harald's reputation among his fellow Guards and drew the attention of senior imperial commanders who recognized his potential for higher command. The wealth he accumulated during his service provided the financial foundation for his later political ambitions. Successful campaigns entitled guards to substantial shares of the loot, which they could use to invest in commercial ventures and acquire wealth that could be easily transported during future campaigns. Harold's financial acumen, combined with his growing reputation as a military leader, paved the way for his return to Scandinavian politics as a serious contender for royal power. Harold's detailed notes and sketches from his campaigns, though not surviving in their original form, influenced the tactical manuals that later Byzantine military writers compiled for future generations of imperial officers. The Siege of Edessa in 1042 marked the culmination of Harold's military education within the imperial service, as he commanded a mixed force of guards and imperial regulars against one of the most formidable fortresses on the eastern frontier. His leadership in reducing this key position showcased his strategic competence. Success required the coordination of multiple assault columns, the use of specialized siege equipment, and maintaining complex supply lines through hostile territory. Harold's methodical approach, carefully planning reconnaissance, managing resources, and preparing for various tactical scenarios, highlighted the professional competence that distinguished successful imperial commanders from mere warriors. The political complexities Harold encountered during his later years of service reflected the factional disputes that plagued the imperial court in the mid-11th century. As aristocratic families vied for influence, Harold's increasing wealth and military reputation naturally drew him into these networks. His foreign origins provided both advantages and challenges in navigating these political currents. The composition of the Varangian Guard began to change during Harold's time, reflecting broader shifts in political and military circumstances. Administrative reforms under Emperor Constantine V's son Monomachos also impacted the Guard's legal status and operational procedures. As imperial authorities sought to standardize military organization, they began to reduce the special privileges that had traditionally distinguished the Guard. This created tensions within the unit, particularly with senior members like Harold, who had vested interests in preserving traditional privileges, while newer recruits often lacked the cultural understanding necessary to appreciate the Guard's unique position. These changes ultimately contributed to Harold's decision to leave imperial service around 1043, a decision influenced by his accumulated wealth, growing political ambitions, and the evolving character of the Guard. His military innovations, particularly in siege warfare, military organization, and diplomacy, reflected his deep understanding of statecraft, which he had developed through observing imperial procedures and participating in complex military operations across diverse theatres of war. The continuing recruitment of Scandinavian warriors into the Varangian Guard during the mid-11th century maintained links between the Byzantine Empire and Northern Europe, creating networks of communication and cultural exchange that influenced political developments throughout the region. Former guards returning to Scandinavia brought with them not only accumulated wealth, but also advanced military techniques, administrative knowledge, and commercial practices that enriched Northern European political entities. This diffusion of Byzantine influence contributed to the sophistication of Scandinavian political institutions, while preserving the cultural ties that had initially supported Varangian expansion into Eastern Europe. The Guard's involvement in the Empire's final major campaigns in southern Italy during the 1040s and 1050s marked the end of an era in Byzantine military expansion, as imperial resources became increasingly focused on defending existing territories rather than acquiring new ones. The strategic priorities shifted, reducing opportunities for profitable campaigns that had previously attracted ambitious warriors. Additionally, the Empire's growing reliance on mercenaries from various sources diminished the special status the Varangian Guard had once enjoyed. The Battle of Hastings in 1066, which led to the fall of the Anglo-Saxon kingdom, marked a decisive turning point in the Guard's recruitment patterns. The Norman victory not only eliminated a significant source of potential recruits, but also highlighted the effectiveness of new military techniques that challenged the Varangian Guard's previously unrivaled tactical superiority within the imperial military hierarchy. The gradual adaptation of tactical innovations by other imperial military units over time diminished the unique advantages that had made Varangian service so valuable to Byzantine commanders. This began the process of institutional change, eventually transforming the Guard from an elite foreign unit into a more conventional imperial military formation. The gradual decline of Varangian military dominance in the decades following the Norman conquest also led to significant shifts in the political landscape across the Rus territories. The traditional warrior merchant elite found themselves increasingly dependent on Slavic administrative structures and local power networks that had developed independently of Scandinavian influence. The death of Yaroslav the Wise in 1054 marked the end of the last generation of rulers who had maintained direct personal ties to Scandinavian political traditions. His successors inherited territories where the majority population had developed distinctly Slavic cultural identities, which bore little resemblance to the northern warrior societies from which their rulers had originally emerged. Archaeological evidence from major Rus cities during this transitional period reveals the systematic replacement of Scandinavian-style residential compounds with architectural forms reflecting Byzantine and local Slavic traditions. Weapon deposits from this time indicate the gradual abandonment of traditional Varangian military equipment in favor of arms and armor that aligned more closely with broader European standards. Linguistically, this cultural shift proved particularly significant for the long-term development of Rus's political institutions. The Old Norse terminology that had characterized early Varangian administrative practices gradually gave way to Slavic vocabulary, which better suited the practical needs of governing a predominantly Slavic population. Legal documents from the mid-11th century show an increasing use of Slavic legal concepts alongside traditional Scandinavian judicial practices, resulting in hybrid legal systems that balance the customary rights of different ethnic communities while maintaining the authority of Rus's rulers. The earliest version of the Russkaya Pravda, known as the Short Pravda, consisted of approximately 40 articles addressing common legal disputes in Rus society. These articles included provisions for compensating victims of violence, regulating property ownership and transfer, and setting procedures for resolving commercial disputes. Archaeological evidence from legal proceedings conducted under these standards includes standardized weights and measures for compensation payments, sealed documents recording legal agreements, and specialized courtroom facilities designed for formal judicial proceedings. The influence of Scandinavian legal traditions remained visible in the Pravda, especially in its emphasis on monetary compensation rather than physical punishment for most crimes. This approach reflected the Northern European preference for resolving conflicts through negotiated settlements that restored social harmony while providing appropriate recompense. The compensation schedules for different types of violence, ranging from minor assaults to homicide, created predictable legal outcomes, encouraging peaceful conflict resolution while preserving the social hierarchies distinguishing free people, dependents, and slaves. The code's protection of foreign merchants and craftsmen recognized the international nature of Rus commerce, with provisions specifically addressing the treatment of Byzantine and other Christian foreigners, reflecting the diplomatic considerations that influenced domestic legal policies. The Russkaya Pravda's detailed treatment of credit arrangements and debt collection procedures highlighted the growing importance of financial relationships in Rus's economic life. Provisions governing the organization of craft guilds and the protection of specialized technical knowledge demonstrated the recognition of skilled labor as vital to urban prosperity. Legal protections for merchants and commercial activities created stable environments for business, providing the regulatory frameworks necessary to manage increasingly complex economic relationships. The judicial procedures established by the Pravda necessitated the creation of specialized administrative institutions capable of enforcing the code's provisions throughout the diverse territories under Rus's control. This led to the development of a professional legal class and standardized court systems, key departures from the informal dispute resolution mechanisms of earlier periods. The appointment of trained judges, the establishment of permanent court facilities in major cities, and the implementation of systematic record-keeping all reflected the institutional sophistication that defined Rus's governance during this time. Archaeological evidence from court complexes includes specialized buildings designed for legal proceedings, archives for storing legal documents, and residential quarters for legal officials, underscoring the growing need for permanence and organization in judicial practices. The training of legal professionals required the development of educational institutions capable of teaching complex legal procedures. This led to the establishment of schools, often associated with major churches and monasteries, where future judges and legal scribes acquired the literacy and specialized knowledge needed for their roles. The curriculum in these schools included instruction in Slavic and Byzantine legal traditions, document preparation, and practical experience in conducting judicial proceedings under the supervision of experienced legal professionals. The graduation of these trained legal professionals helped form a class of administrators whose expertise transcended ethnic boundaries, serving the practical needs of increasingly complex governmental systems. The social impact of the Russkaya Pravda extended beyond legal matters, bringing fundamental changes to the relationships between various ethnic and social groups within Rus society. The code's provisions established new categories of legal status, gradually replacing tribal and clan-based identities with more standardized systems based on wealth and occupation. This allowed for greater integration of diverse populations into unified social structures, while offering mechanisms for social mobility that rewarded economic success and professional competence. Archaeological evidence from urban centers governed by Pravda regulations shows the emergence of mixed neighborhoods where Slavic, Scandinavian, and other ethnic groups lived in close proximity, participating in common economic and social activities. The fragmentation of centralized Varangian authority in the late 11th century resulted from succession disputes, regional economic interests, and the difficulties of maintaining control over vast territories using the communication and transportation methods available at the time. The death of Yaroslav the Wise in 1054 marked the beginning of territorial division among his sons, which reflected both Scandinavian inheritance traditions and the practical requirements of governing regions with different economic bases and political practices. The division of territories among the princes created autonomous political units that maintained nominal allegiance to Kiev, but developed independent relationships with their local populations and neighboring powers. Yaroslav's principle of lateral succession, intended to prevent the fratricidal wars that had plagued earlier succession crises, was based on a rotation system for the princes. However, the practical implementation of this system proved difficult, as the Rurikid dynasty expanded and the complexity of territorial holdings grew. The system required princes to rotate between different cities, leading to administrative discontinuity and a lack of stable relationships between rulers and their subjects. Archaeological evidence from this period shows the construction of temporary administrative buildings rather than permanent palaces, reflecting the mobile nature of political authority under the lateral succession system. Economic factors played a crucial role in the political fragmentation. Archaeological findings from these new regional centers reveal substantial investments in fortifications, administrative buildings, and commercial facilities, all supporting independent political developments. The military implications of this political fragmentation became apparent as inter-princely conflicts increased in the late 11th and early 12th centuries. Competing branches of the Rurikid dynasty fought to expand their territories, while defending against rivals with similar claims to legitimacy. These conflicts were not typical conquest wars, but complex disputes over inheritance rights, commercial privileges, and territorial boundaries, reflecting the mature political relationships that had evolved within Rus society. The military techniques used in these conflicts emphasized siege warfare and defensive operations, marking a shift from the mobile campaigns of earlier Varangian military activity. This change mirrored the settled nature of the populations and territories involved. Recruitment practices during these conflicts also revealed the fundamental transformation in the military foundations of Rus's political power. Traditional Varangian warrior bands were replaced by forces combining professional soldiers, local militias, and foreign mercenaries recruited from diverse sources across Eastern Europe. The decline in Scandinavian military recruitment forced the princes to turn to other sources of manpower, such as Turkic nomads from the southern steppes, Western European knights seeking profitable service, and Slavic warriors, whose local knowledge and cultural ties offered advantages in regional conflicts. Archaeological evidence from military sites during this period shows the adoption of diverse weapons and equipment, reflecting the multicultural composition of princely armies. The fortification systems developed during this time of political fragmentation marked significant advances in military engineering, combining the changing nature of warfare with the increased resources available to regional centers for defensive construction. The massive earthwork fortifications built around major cities in the late 11th century incorporated design principles drawn from Byzantine and Western European military architecture, yet adapted these techniques to local topographical conditions and available construction materials. The scale of these projects demanded unprecedented coordination of labor and resources, showcasing the administrative capabilities regional princes had developed to manage their territories. These sophisticated defensive works indicated access to advanced military engineering knowledge, but they also reflected the complex diplomatic relationships that emerged between competing Rus' principalities. As these princes sought to strengthen their positions, they formed alliances that transcended ethnic and cultural boundaries, using strategic marriages, commercial agreements, and military partnerships to secure their political goals. Marriage alliances between Rus princes and foreign rulers, including kings of Hungary, dukes of Poland, and Byzantine imperial families, demonstrated the international recognition of Rus' political power and created diplomatic obligations that influenced domestic policies. Archaeological evidence from diplomatic sites includes specialized facilities for conducting negotiations and ceremonial buildings designed to host foreign dignitaries according to established protocols. The Mongol invasions, beginning in 1237, encountered a politically fragmented Rus that proved unable to coordinate effective resistance against Batu Khan's systematic military campaigns, targeting the major political centers of Eastern Europe. The Mongol military system, based on highly mobile cavalry, supported by advanced siege equipment and extensive intelligence networks, held decisive advantages over the defensive strategies that had evolved during the period of interprincely conflicts. The speed and coordination of Mongol operations exploited the political divisions within Rus, preventing cooperation between principalities and taking full advantage of the weakened military capacity of the region. Archaeological evidence from sites destroyed during the Mongol campaigns shows the devastating effectiveness of Mongol siege techniques, which combined traditional nomadic mobility with advanced military technologies learned through earlier conquests in China and Central Asia. The Siege of Ryazan in December 1237 highlighted the Mongol military capabilities that would dominate their conquest of Rus's territories. Batu Khan's forces systematically dismantled the city's fortifications with coordinated attacks, overwhelming the defenders despite their fierce resistance. The destruction of Ryazan's population and fortifications served both strategic and psychological purposes, eliminating a potential base for resistance while sending a clear message to other Rus's cities about the futility of opposing Mongol demands. The fall of Moscow in January 1238 marked another crucial phase in the Mongol conquest, as the capture of this strategically important fortress eliminated a major obstacle to further Mongol advances into the heart of Rus's territories. The brief siege of Moscow demonstrated the overwhelming superiority of Mongol military organization compared to the improvised defensive arrangements of Rus's forces. The subsequent systematic destruction of the city served as a warning to any other cities considering resistance. Archaeological evidence from Mongol siege sites includes specialized military equipment and the remains of defensive works, confirming the technological advantages that allowed for such rapid conquests of fortified positions. The Mongol conquest of Kiev in 1240 marked the definitive end of Varangian political dominance in Eastern Europe. The continued influence of Varangian traditions in Ukrainian political culture can be seen in the ongoing significance of Kiev as a symbolic center of legitimacy. The adoption of governmental institutions reflecting the federal nature of the original Rus state reinforced the connection between the past and the emerging political realities of the region. The Cossack organizations that emerged in the 16th century bore striking resemblances to the warrior merchant associations that had characterized early Varangian society, however demonstrating the lasting impact of Varangian political traditions on the cultural and military identity of Eastern Europe. While the emphasis on collective decision-making and elected leadership within the Cossack settlements echoed the participatory elements that had once characterized Rus's political culture. It also highlighted the distinct continuity of traditions from the Varangian period. Archaeological records from Cossack settlements, such as weapons, fortifications, and residential structures, demonstrate how Rus's material culture remained influential despite centuries of foreign domination. This continuity is similarly reflected in Belarusian cultural development, where the enduring influence of Varangian institutional innovations can be seen in legal traditions and commercial practices that were originally introduced during the height of Rus's expansion into Western territories. The legal codes in the Grand Duchy of Lithuania, for example, included substantial elements from the Ruskaya Pravda, while the commercial privileges granted to merchants in Belarusian cities mirrored the trading practices established during the peak of Varangian commercial activity. Archaeological investigations in medieval Belarusian sites have revealed material culture assemblages that display direct continuity with the hybrid Scandinavian Slavic traditions that mark the western regions of the Rusi state. These findings underscore the lasting impact of the Varangians on the cultural landscape of Eastern Europe. The groundbreaking archaeological discoveries that have reshaped our understanding of Varangian material culture began with the systematic excavations at Stealoga during the mid-20th century. These excavations revealed the sophisticated nature of early Scandinavian settlements in Eastern Europe and illustrated the extensive commercial networks that connected these northern outposts to markets across the medieval world. The preservation conditions at Stealoga allowed for the survival of organic materials, offering unique insights into Varangian daily life, such as leather goods, textiles, wooden implements, and food remains, that documented the adaptation of Scandinavian cultural practices to the local environment and available resources. The excavation of Varangian burial sites throughout the former Rus's territories has also provided detailed evidence of the social hierarchies and cultural practices that characterized various periods of Scandinavian settlement. Grave goods from these sites show an evolution from purely Scandinavian traditions toward hybrid identities that emerged through interaction with local populations. Notably, the famous chamber graves discovered near Nensdovo contain assemblages combining high-quality Scandinavian weapons and jewelry with Byzantine silk, Islamic silver, and locally produced ceramics, underscoring the cosmopolitan nature of Varangian elite culture. The standardization of certain grave goods across widely separated sites suggests that cultural connections were maintained throughout the Varangian territories, while regional variations in burial practices reveal how Scandinavian traditions were adapted to local preferences and materials. Recent archaeological studies employing advanced scientific techniques have uncovered previously unknown aspects of Varangian commercial activities and technological capabilities. Evidence for sophisticated metalworking operations has been found at major Varangian centers, where high-quality steel was produced using a combination of Scandinavian knowledge and innovations adapted from Byzantine and Islamic sources. The discovery of standardized weights and measures that align with multiple international systems further demonstrates the commercial sophistication that enabled Varangian merchants to operate effectively in diverse cultural and economic environments. The investigation of Varangian fortifications has provided critical insight into the military engineering that allowed small numbers of Scandinavian warriors to control vast territories populated by potentially hostile groups. Defensive works at sites like Rizkovo Gorodishi incorporate design elements drawn from contemporary European military architecture, adapted to local topographical conditions and available materials. The evolution of fortification designs over time reflects both the changing nature of military threats and the increasing resources available to Varangian rulers as their territories expanded and commercial activities flourished. Underwater archaeology in the Baltic and Black Sea regions has shed light on the advanced shipbuilding technologies that facilitated Varangian expansion along Eastern Europe's river systems. The discovery of ship burials containing vessels specifically designed for river navigation highlights the crucial role maritime technology played in Varangian success, as well as the ceremonial importance these societies placed on their seafaring traditions. The analysis of wood samples from these vessels has provided valuable information about forest management practices and timber trade networks that supported the construction and maintenance of large fleets. The role of the Varangians in connecting northern Europe to Byzantium. the Islamic world and Central Asia is most evident through the study of trade goods and monetary systems that linked these diverse regions into integrated commercial networks spanning thousands of miles. The monetary systems developed within Varangian territories reflected the international nature of their commercial activities. The adoption of weight-based silver systems that could accommodate coins from various sources enabled Varangian merchants to operate effectively in markets with differing currencies and measurement standards. Archaeological evidence of the cutting and testing of silver coins demonstrates the sophisticated evaluation techniques employed to ensure reliable commercial transactions despite the diversity of monetary systems involved in long-distance trade. The transmission of technological innovations along Varangian trade routes included not only weapons and luxury goods, but also agricultural techniques, craft production methods, and architectural principles that enhance the economic capabilities of societies along these routes. The introduction of improved ploughing techniques and new crop varieties increased agricultural productivity in regions previously limited to subsistence farming. Likewise, the spread of metalworking knowledge enabled local populations to produce higher quality tools and weapons. The archaeological record highlights the gradual diffusion of these innovations across territories linked by Varangian commercial activities, demonstrating the transformative impact of sustained cultural contact. The religious and intellectual exchanges facilitated by Varangian commercial networks also contributed to the development of more sophisticated cultural institutions throughout Northern and Eastern Europe. The interaction between different traditions sparked innovations in art, literature, and religious practice, particularly through the transmission of Byzantine religious concepts and artistic styles. These exchanges played a significant role in shaping the development of distinctive regional traditions that combined elements from multiple sources while expressing local cultural values and aesthetic preferences. Archaeological evidence of the construction of hybrid religious buildings and the production of syncretic artistic works underscores the creative potential that emerged from sustained cultural interaction during the Varangian period. Modern scholarly debates regarding Varangian influence have evolved significantly since the 18th century, shifting from the Normanist versus anti-Normanist controversies to contemporary interdisciplinary approaches. Researchers today combine archaeological evidence, linguistic analysis, genetic studies, and comparative historical research to form a more nuanced understanding of the complex processes of early medieval cultural exchange. DNA analysis applied to human remains from Varangian period sites has provided direct evidence of the demographic composition of early Rus's society, confirming the presence of Scandinavian populations alongside indigenous groups. These studies reveal the gradual genetic mixing that occurred over several generations, supporting historical accounts of intermarriage and cultural integration, while documenting the biological foundations of the hybrid societies that emerged through Varangian expansion. Linguistic research has also contributed to the understanding of Varangian influence, particularly through detailed analysis of loan words and structural changes in Slavic languages during Scandinavian political dominance. The identification of Old Norse administrative and military terminology within early Slavic legal documents provides evidence for institutional innovations introduced by the Varangians. Additionally, the study of place names throughout former Russia's territories helps trace the geographical extent of Scandinavian settlement and influence. The survival of Scandinavian linguistic elements in modern Russian, Ukrainian, and Belarusian languages further illustrates the deep cultural impact of the Varangian period. Despite centuries of political and social changes, the comparative study of medieval European political development has placed Varangian achievements in broader context, highlighting both their uniqueness and their parallels to contemporary developments in other regions. The Varangians' creation of territorial states, integrating diverse ethnic groups under unified political authority, mirrored similar processes occurring in Western Europe. Their emphasis on commercial activities and urban development anticipated the economic transformations that would characterize the later medieval period. The institutional innovations developed in Varangian territories, particularly in legal codification and administrative organization, influenced political development throughout Eastern Europe, providing models for governmental practices that would endure for centuries. Recent archaeological discoveries continue to expand our understanding of Varangian material culture and its relation to broader patterns of medieval European development. New excavations have revealed previously unknown aspects of Scandinavian settlement patterns, economic activities, and cultural practices. Investigations into rural settlements have offered insights into the agricultural foundations that supported Varangian urban centers, while the study of craft production sites has documented the technological capabilities behind the manufacture of goods for both local consumption and long-distance trade. These discoveries confirm the sophisticated nature of Varangian society and highlight how Scandinavian settlers adapted their traditional practices to the environmental and cultural conditions of Eastern Europe. The ongoing significance of the Varangian historical legacy extends beyond academic research, influencing contemporary political and cultural debates surrounding national identity, historical continuity, and interethnic relations within modern Eastern European societies. The Rurikid dynasty's founding role in establishing the medieval Rus state continues to shape discussions about the historical foundations of Russian, Ukrainian, and Belarusian national identities. Meanwhile, archaeological evidence of Varangian cultural achievements provides material for contemporary cultural expressions that seek to connect modern populations with their medieval ancestors. The preservation and interpretation of Varangian archaeological sites have become essential for cultural heritage management in regions that were once part of the Rus state, with museums and historical parks offering public access to the material remains of this crucial period in Eastern European history. The reconstruction of Varangian settlements and the display of archaeological artifacts allow contemporary audiences to appreciate the sophistication of medieval Scandinavian culture and understand the complex processes of cultural interaction that shape the development of modern Eastern European societies. The scholarly consensus that has emerged from decades of interdisciplinary research now recognizes the Varangian period as a formative stage in Eastern European development, during which the interaction of Scandinavian, Slavic, and other cultural traditions laid the institutional foundations and cultural identities that would influence the region's historical trajectory. Varangian achievements in creating stable political institutions capable of governing diverse populations across vast territories set important precedents for state building that would later be emulated by rulers across Europe. Their commercial innovations created economic networks that connected Eastern Europe to the broader medieval world system. The transformation of Varangian warrior merchants into the founders of lasting political dynasties and cultural traditions stands as one of medieval Europe's most remarkable examples of successful cultural adaptation and institutional innovation. Their legacy endured beyond the political catastrophes that dismantled their governmental structures, influencing the emergence of modern Eastern European nations. The Varangian contribution to world history extends beyond their military and political achievements,